Hi everyone, it's Jennifer McDaniel with Soul Abode, and I'm excited to be here with you again to speak to you about the next dimension in our soul care process, which is the soul dimension. So at Soul Abode, we believe that soul care is the new self-care. And our soul care wheel is a framework that's rooted in 6 dimensions of well-being. Each dimension can either add or detract from your overall well-being and actually improve your health or diminish your health. So this week, we're focusing on the soul dimension. And the great thing about the soul dimension is that the soul care process begins with activating this very important part, the soul dimension. Spiritual wellness in itself involves having a strong sense of purpose, nourishing your soul, seeking out meaning, seeking out fulfillment, finding understanding. The soul dimension is rooted in spiritual connectivity. It speaks to your identity. It speaks to your purpose in life. It gives you the ability to really understand why you're here and what you're supposed to do while you're here. So activating this soul dimension requires work. It requires, firstly, that we seek up and we look upwards so that we can actually create our identity in that vertical relationship with God, because spiritual well-being begins with healing. Okay, it begins with healing our hearts. And as women, we all have a story. We have stories where we have lost hope. We have stories of heartbreak and stories of trauma, stories of being wounded by the people that we love, and stories of betrayal and stories of shame and guilt. And all of these stories begin to weigh on us. The emotional, the physical, the spiritual weight that we as women are carrying is detrimental to our health. It is killing us. So as women, we have to find the correct tools to be able to develop healthy coping mechanisms and different ways to communicate from a healthy perspective so that we're not carrying all of this weight on our hearts. So we start with soul, because soul is where the healing takes place. This is where you have to start. When the soul dimension is activated, it starts to nourish connection. When connection is activated, it starts to nourish mindset. When mindset is activated, it starts to nourish feelings. When feelings is activated, we start to nourish movement. And when movement is activated, it starts to nourish our surroundings. So you can see how each dimension of this soul care wheel, right? It's a process. It's a living, breathing organism. It's a living, breathing way of navigating your life so that you can just feel better. We just want to feel better. We're tired. And I remember a time in my life where I was dealing with a lot of brokenness. My heart was broken in so many different pieces that I didn't think that I would ever heal. I was in a constant battle against my labels of self-perception. So things, I would have these conversations with myself. I was just not in a loving space. I wasn't honoring myself. I wasn't making the best choices for myself. I was very hard with myself. I wasn't my best friend. I was labeling myself things like fat. I was dealing with body shame. I was overweight, worthless, stupid, foolish, unwanted, unloved, unlovable. I used to think I was ugly, unreliable, incompetent, unstable. I used to call myself clumsy, stubborn, controlling, useless. At times I was feeling like I was a bad mother, bad daughter, bad sister, bad friend. And I want to say that was a time where I was just believing the lie, right? I was believing all of these untruths about myself. And it was my belief system that led me to continue to just not feel good, because I didn't have the right identity. I didn't have the right perception of who I really am and who I really was. So what we have to remember is whether or not these labels come from someone else or they're labels that you have just chosen to identify with due to shame and guilt around perceived mistakes and experiences, it doesn't matter. I believed them and they became a part of my being. And then it was one day that I decided that I could no longer depend on my own understanding of who I thought I was, and I had to figure out who I really was. If I was going to survive, I needed to figure out who I was. I needed to find out the truth about who I was in spirit, who God says I was. And so I started to develop that relationship with him. I started to be intentional about developing a connection with God because I wanted to know him, but most importantly, I wanted him to know me because I wanted to be healed. So I ask you, do you want to be healed? Do you really want to be healed? Because I know that my story is very similar to your stories. You may not be in the same situation, but we all feel it, right? Because we're connected. And so I ask you again, do you want to be healed? And if you want to be healed, how bad do you want to be healed? What are you willing to do at this point in your life to be healed? And I want to just share with you what I call my weapons. These are some of the weapons that I had to actually take on to be able to move myself through a process of healing that was rooted in soul care. So the first thing that I had to do, and that you have to do, is you have to recognize that you're just tired of fighting. You got to get tired of fighting against the same people, the same situations, the same cycles. And you have to give yourself permission to say you're tired, right? You're tired and you're done. And you also have to be vulnerable enough with yourself and with the people that are in your life to acknowledge what you want in your precious life. This is when change starts, acknowledging and validating your feelings and knowing that how you feel matters. The second step is to identify the lies. And this is all rooted in belief system. When we are wounded, we believe things about us that aren't true. And when we start to believe lies and things that aren't true, it shapes our beliefs, it shapes our behaviors, and it colors all of the relationships in our life. And we begin to filter everything that we do through this lens. So when you identify with labels and when you identify with names, it blocks you. So when you start to identify with truth and you start to rename yourself, right? You start to move forward. When you start to disregard those labels and those lies and those belief systems, you start to move forward. And I think about some of the labels I've accepted about myself and from other people. And when I think about it, it makes me cringe because I just didn't know. The third thing you have to do after you identify the lies is you have to identify the truth. The most powerful weapon that we have as women is truth. The truth and who the Creator says we are. And once you're able to identify truth, you have to learn to live from that truth because that's where your real identity is actually rooted in. It's rooted in Him. It's rooted in spirit. It's rooted in what He says you are. And you also have to surround yourself with a tribe of people that speak this truth to you and reinforce the truth of who you are in Him and who you are so that you don't ever forget. Okay? You don't ever start to believe those lies about yourself. And the fourth thing you have to do is you got to get brave. You got to get the courage to do something different. You got to get out of that toxic relationship. You got to quit that dead-end job. You got to get off of those antidepressants. You got to let that friend go that doesn't support you, that sits around and talks about you behind your back, where she says she's your friend, but you just really don't feel like she's your friend. She's really not your girl. You got to stop hiding your gifts. Stop pushing your dreams aside and get up and start that business and go for it. Stop trying to make things fit that don't fit. Okay? What this means is when you've had enough, you have to be willing to just get out of your own way. Okay? Because it's time for you to respond to your life differently. When you know the truth, truth is like a seed. And when you know truth, you have to nurture it. You have to water it. You have to water it and you have to wait for it to actually produce fruit. And when you're rooted in this soul dimension, the soul dimension is the root. When you build strong roots into the ground and you're being nourished by soil and water, what happens is those roots become strong and they feed up into the branches, and the branches are the other dimensions. The other dimensions will start to bear fruit in your life, and all of the pieces in your life will start to bloom. And you'll begin to reap the harvest. You will begin to reap the rewards of happiness and fulfillment and knowing who you are in terms of your true identity. Because there's more for you. There is more for you than what you know right now. And so right now, what needs to happen is your seeds need the right environment so that you can start to grow and align with your vision in your life. You need to start to align so that you can create roots that are rooted in truth. It's time for you to start understanding that you have seeds that need to be planted. Right? Seeds that need to be planted and nourished so that you can start to renew yourself in healthy ways. So if you've been wondering, is this it? Is there anything else for me? Have I just kind of just reached the end of my process? If you've been wondering what the next step is, I want to encourage you that there is something more for you. There's something more for all of us. But in order for things to change, you have to change. The change begins with you. And it changes when we get this soul piece right. That's when it changes. So you have a future. You know, we all have these different stories. And when you start living like you have a future, right? This is the key. When you start living like you have a future, you start living and you stop surviving. You stop surviving and you start thriving. Because there's something waiting for us. There's something waiting for you on the other side if you're willing to do the soul work necessary to actually make the shift. There is nothing in your life that can't be renewed. There is nothing in your life that can't be restored. You have to get established in your purpose so that you can start to change your story. Why are you here? What is your purpose? What legacy are you going to leave behind? If we don't start to heal ourselves, we're going to be passing on this trauma and this pain and this uncertainty to our daughters and our granddaughters and our great-granddaughters and our sons and to the next generations. And what's going to happen is we're just going to continue these cycles of unhealthy living. So it starts with us. It starts with us. The change starts with us. So we start where we are. You set things in motion, right? I want you to make a determination. You're going to set in motion a new label. You're going to set in motion a new belief. You're going to set in motion a new story, right? Because you've been lukewarm for too long, right? It's time to get lit up. I want you to get lit up, and I want you to start a bonfire so that you can shine as bright as you can and that people are going to be blinded by your light, okay? So this is where it starts. It starts with activating soul. This week, we're going to be giving you a lot of information on this soul care process, on what soul care is. We have a special guest that's joining us this week to go a little bit deeper into soul, okay? The soul dimension and how she actually started to activate soul in her life. And if you want to know more about our soul care process and more about Soul Abode, what I would want you to do is go ahead and click on the link in our link tree. And that link tree is going to connect you to our 7-day guide, our 7-day soul care guide. And if you sign up for that, it's going to give you a lot of information on each dimension so that you can have a well-informed understanding about what the dimensions are and how they support your well-being. And the beauty of it is it's also going to give you a step-by-step process over the next 7 days to show you how to quickly activate the dimensions in your life. So I'm looking forward to what we're going to be showing you this week, and that's it for now.